Kaelen Vance engaged the Dust Devils, primary cutting lasers, their ruby beams biting into the asteroid's ancient rock. One last haul. This was it, the final score that would buy him a quiet life, far from the void's cold embrace. The Dust Devil threaded the needle through a labyrinth of black tunnels within Oblivion's end, its thrusters echoing a lonely rumble. Decades of this, Kaelen mused, the endless grind, the fleeting faces of lost crews, now just ghosts in the asteroid dust. This hollowed-out rock was nothing but a tomb for forgotten dreams, and a forge for the weary. His gaze drifted to a faded holographic photo on the console, a vibrant green world under a cerulean sky. Home. He tapped a finger against the flickering credit balance, the numbers stubbornly shy of his target. Just a little more, he muttered. The promise of fertile soil and soft breezes a potent lure against the metallic tang of recycled air. Retirement wasn't a luxury, it was a desperate, hard-earned salvation. A sharp beep from the long-range scanner broke his reverie. Grid 4 Gamma, an uncharted sector, was displaying an anomalous mineral signature. Kaelen squinted at the data. It was off his planned route, deep in an unstable zone. Common sense screamed caution, but the lure of a quick, profitable find, the one that would finally tip his balance to freedom, was a siren song in the silence. His hand hesitated, then guided the Dust Devil towards the deeper darkness. The fissure was too narrow for the Kamasva. Dust Devil, Kaelen powered down, grabbing his comms unit and headlamp. The air grew heavy, thick, with an unfamiliar silence that pressed in closer than any asteroid wall. No distant hum of seismic activity, no faint whisper of cosmic radiation. Just an absolute suffocating void. His heavy breathing was the only sound, a stark reminder of his profound isolation. He pushed deeper, the beam of his headlamp swallowed by the encroaching blackness. Kaelen's headlamp beam, a solitary spear in the oppressive black, pierced through the narrow fissure's end. It didn't find more rock. Instead, it caught a faint, pulsing glow, a soft, ethereal luminescence that seemed to breathe with its own inner light. He stepped forward, his heavy boots crunching on loose scree, and the fissure opened into a small, echoing chamber. Here, the darkness was not absolute. It was merely a canvas for the alien wonder before him. Delicate crystalline structures, like frozen lace or spun starlight, covered the chamber walls and ceiling, radiating soft blues and violets. They pulsed with a gentle rhythm, a living tapestry of light. The silence, which had been so absolute, was now broken by a low, almost musical hum emanating from the glowing flora. Kaelen had seen many strange things in the void, but nothing like this. "By the void," he whispered, the sound swallowed by the chamber's vastness. "What in the hells are you?" He felt a mix of awe and a prickle of apprehension, the kind that came from standing before something utterly beautiful, utterly unknown. The light seemed to beckon, to promise secrets. The chamber, now fully illuminated by the soft, living glow, revealed the intricate detail of the phenomenon. Kaelen, his initial shock giving way to professional curiosity, unclipped a diagnostic scanner from his belt. Its beam, normally a harsh, probing light, seemed almost deferential against the ambient luminescence. The scanner's display flickered, struggling to parse the readings. Unknown biological signature. His internal comms crackled, the ship's AI interpreting the data. No known cellular structure. Crystalline matrix present. Energy output. Anomalous. Kaelen moved closer, his gloved hand reaching for a tendril that spiraled from the wall. It wasn't a mineral vein. It was organic, yet hard, like solidified light. The filaments pulsed, each delicate strand a conduit for the soft glow. He noted its unusual growth patterns, almost deliberate, as if it were reaching, expanding. It even seemed to subtly breathe, the collective hum shifting in pitch, as if reacting to his very presence. "Looks like some kind of deep space mycelium," Kaelen mused internally, "but built from starlight and pure energy." This wasn't just a rock formation. It was a living, breathing entity, unlike anything recorded in the colonial database. As Kaelen watched the scanner struggle, his mind, ever the miner's, began to calculate. The energy output, the unique crystalline structure, the sheer alienness of it all. This wasn't just a curiosity. This was a fortune. A discovery of this magnitude would be worth more credits than 1,000 years of asteroid dust. Enough to buy a small homestead on Kepler 186f, a plot of land with real dirt, and a sky that wasn't a tactical display. Enough to finally leave the void behind, forever. He could almost feel the warm sun on his face. The risks, the strangeness of its biological makeup, the fact that it was entirely uncatalogued, he considered them for a fleeting moment. Then he dismissed them. What was a little biological anomaly compared to a lifetime of quiet retirement? He'd faced worse. This was his ticket. The light from the fungus seemed to swell, growing slightly brighter, more inviting, as if sensing his conviction. Kaelen's eyes, illuminated by the otherworldly glow, held a calculating, almost desperate glint. With the decision made, caution became a secondary concern. Kaelen extended his gloved hand, slowly, towards a particularly vibrant crystalline tendril that spiraled from a cluster near his face. It pulsed with a captivating violet light. He hesitated for a moment, a lifetime of miner's instinct warring with the promise of freedom. Then, his fingers made contact. A strange sensation, a cold warmth, spread through his glove. It wasn't the expected chill of an asteroid, nor the heat of a geothermal vent. It was utterly alien. A subtle vibration, almost imperceptible, resonated up his arm, echoing the low hum of the chamber. Kaelen felt a prickle of fascination, a primal curiosity overriding his ingrained apprehension. He leaned in closer, studying the point of contact. A faint, almost imperceptible pulse of light emanated from where his glove met the crystal, like a subtle ripple across a still pond. His brow furrowed in intrigue, a genuine, unburdened expression he rarely wore. As the light pulsed from the point of contact, something shifted in Kaelen's mind. Not a thought, but an image. Brief, vivid, and startlingly clear. He saw a sun-drenched field of tall green grass, a gentle breeze rustling through it, the scent of damp earth and blooming flowers. A child's laughter echoed in the distance. His childhood home, a place he hadn't thought of with such clarity in decades. The memory was sweet, potent, and utterly out of place in the cold, dark asteroid. Kaelen snatched his hand back, shaking his head sharply. The vision faded as quickly as it came, leaving him slightly disoriented. "Just fatigue," he muttered, his voice rough. "Or the atmosphere in here. Probably some kind of trace gas messing with my head." He ran a hand over his grizzled face, trying to rationalize the impossible. But even as he dismissed it, a lingering warmth, a faint echo of that memory, remained. A beautiful vision, or a dangerous trick. He didn't know, but the hum of the fungus seemed to deepen, a silent, knowing thrum. Kaelen Vance, a man whose hands knew the intimate feel of raw ore and cold steel, now approached the Lumina Mycelium with a reverence he usually reserved for a fresh cup of synth coffee. His multi-tool, usually a weapon against stubborn rock, was now a surgeon's instrument. He carefully extended a fine-tipped probe, its energy field calibrated to disturb the delicate crystalline structures as little as possible. As the probe made contact, a faint ripple of sapphire light pulsed from the point of entry, spreading like a slow breath through the network. The low hum, which Kaelen had initially dismissed as ambient static, deepened, subtly resonating with the tremor in his own chest. "Interesting," he muttered, his internal voice a dry whisper. "It reacts, not just absorbing light, but sensing." He collected a small, glowing filament, sealing it in a containment field, the mycelium's light seeming to dim momentarily in that spot, then quickly recover. Was this just a biological reaction, or something more? The question lingered, an itch he couldn't quite scratch. The samples collected, Kaelen found himself lingering in the chamber, an inexplicable sense of well-being washing over him. The air, usually thick with the metallic tang of rock dust and recycled oxygen, felt fresh, almost sweet. The shifting patterns of blue and violet light mesmerized him, each pulse a slow, hypnotic beat. He settled onto a smooth section of rock, his helmet's light dimmed, bathing his weary face in the fungus's ethereal glow. His mining schedule, his credit balance, even the distant dream of a green planet, all seemed to recede, replaced by a profound, almost primal calm. It was a comfort he hadn't felt in decades, a gentle embrace that promised respite from the void's relentless pull. Just a few more minutes. He rationalized, his eyes half-lidded, lost in the dangerous beauty. No harm in resting. As the calm deepened, a memory surfaced, unbidden, not a fleeting image this time, but a vivid scene. The strained lines on his father's face, the quiet disappointment in his sister's eyes, the unspoken words of a family he'd chosen to leave behind. He felt the cold sting of the argument, the hollow ache of his decision. The vision, tinged with old regret, left him with a confused unease, a longing that warred with the newfound serenity. Kaelen clutched his head, the memory echoing in the glowing chamber. "What in the void?" he whispered, his voice hoarse. Was the fungus somehow drawing these from him? Or was he simply exhausted, his mind playing tricks in this alien light? Kaelen tried to pull himself together, his miner's pragmatism fighting against the unsettling visions. He pulled out his data pad, attempting to log the strange experience to find a logical explanation. "Hallucinations, maybe," he muttered, tapping at the screen. "Gas leaks, anomalous psychotropic emissions. Or just plain old space fatigue." He stood, the desire to escape the chamber a sharp spike in his chest. Yet his gaze kept returning to the glowing mycelium, a subtle, irresistible pull. He took a few steps towards the fissure's exit, then hesitated, his eyes drawn back to the pulsing light. The visions were unsettling, yes, but the comfort was a lure he found hard to resist. He sighed, turning back towards the glow. Just a bit more research. The scientific pretext was thin, even to Kaelen. He knew he was drawn to the fungus for reasons beyond professional curiosity. He approached a particularly vibrant cluster, its crystalline tendrils reaching out like delicate, luminescent fingers. With a deep breath, he pulled off his environmental glove, his bare, calloused hand trembling slightly. He extended his fingers, making direct contact with the cool, smooth surface of the mycelium. A powerful jolt, not of electricity but of pure sensation, surged up his arm. The light intensified, spreading like a liquid fire under his skin. His eyes widened, then slowly closed, as a long, vivid memory began to bloom in his mind. It wasn't just a memory. It was a life unlived, a path he had abandoned, now playing out with breathtaking clarity, a dream he could almost touch. The warmth that enveloped Kaelen was unlike anything he'd ever felt in the cold void. It was the heat of a summer sun on his face, the soft breeze carrying the scent of rich, damp earth. He stood on a hill overlooking lush, green fields. A small cottage with a wisp of smoke curling from its chimney nestled in the valley below. This was home, the one he'd abandoned. A woman with hair like spun starlight turned from the cottage, a smile blooming on her face, and Kaelen felt a pang of joy so pure it brought tears to his eyes. "You're back, Kaelen," she called, her voice a melody he hadn't heard in decades. "Dinner's ready." A child, small and bright, ran from the cottage, his laughter echoing through the fields. Kaelen reached out, his heart swelling with a happiness he'd convinced himself was impossible. He hadn't left, he had stayed, he had chosen differently. Every regret, every lonely year in the black, dissolved like mist. Miles away from any sun, deep within the asteroid's heart, Kaelen Vance remained motionless. His body, still slumped against the glowing mycelium, had taken on a faint, almost translucent sheen. The subtle blue and violet light of the fungus reflected off his skin, giving him an ethereal, unearthly glow. A pervasive warmth, emanating from the crystalline tendrils wrapped gently around his arm, seeped into his bones. It was a comfort he hadn't known in decades, a sensation so profound it dwarfed the biting cold of space and the aching loneliness of his life. "This is good," he thought, his mind adrift in the verdant fields of his illusion. So much better than the cold. He didn't notice the slight stiffness in his fingers, the almost imperceptible hardening of his skin. The rhythmic hum of the Lumina Mycelium was a lullaby, gently rocking him further into its embrace. Days blurred into an indistinct continuum. The Dust Devil sat abandoned in its docking bay, its systems slowly powering down, rations untouched. Kaelen, however, was thriving. He would stir occasionally, his body feeling heavy and oddly stiff. But the pull of the glowing chamber was irresistible. Each return to the Lumina Mycelium brought him back to his perfect life. A reality more vibrant than any he'd ever known. The fungus, a silent artisan, sculpted his memories with increasing detail, presenting not just the life he wanted but the life he regretted not having. He saw himself walking his child to school, holding his wife's hand, the small, everyday joys he'd traded for credits. Just a little longer, he'd rationalize. Just a few more hours. The real world, with its cold steel and endless dark, faded further into irrelevance. The few times Kaelen did pull himself away from the glowing chamber, the Dust Devil seemed duller, less substantial. The familiar controls, once an extension of his will, felt distant, almost alien. He squinted at the flickering data screens, the numbers for his remaining haul seeming less important than the warmth and laughter of his illusory home. It's all so gray out here, he thought, a profound disinterest settling over him. He found himself struggling to remember the specific coordinates of his mining claim, the urgency of his retirement mission. He just wanted to go back. Back to the light. Back to the green fields. The cold mechanical reality of his ship felt like an intrusion, a harsh whisper of a life he was rapidly forgetting. One fleeting moment, as he absently rubbed a hand across his arm, Kaelen noticed it. A small, hard patch of iridescent glitter on his forearm, no bigger than a thumbnail. It caught the faint, ambient light of the chamber, sparkling with an almost crystalline quality. He frowned, his mind still half lost in the golden haze of memory. "Damn asteroid dust," he muttered, a familiar miner's complaint. He scraped at it with a calloused finger, a gesture born of years spent caked in rock and grime. The glittering particles flaked away, leaving behind smooth, unblemished skin. He dismissed it instantly, his thoughts already drifting back to the sunlit fields and the sound of his child's laughter. The dust, he reasoned, was simply more persistent than usual. The Dust Devil's cockpit, usually a sanctuary of familiar grime and flickering readouts, felt alien. Kaelen reached for the primary navigation console, his arm moving with an unfamiliar stiffness, a grinding protest from joints that had always been reliable. He grunted, a sound of frustration more than pain. "Damn old age," he muttered, his voice raspy in the cabin's recycled air. For decades, his body had been a finely tuned machine, battered but resilient. Now, every movement was a battle. A strange rigidity had settled into his muscles, not the ache of exhaustion, but a deep, bone-deep inflexibility. He pressed a button, the multifunction display flickering to life, but his fingers, usually nimble despite their calluses, fumbled. He had to adjust his grip twice before the command registered. "Just a long haul," he rationalized, rubbing a particularly stiff elbow. But beneath the skin, a subtle glint, almost imperceptible, shimmered like trapped starlight. The dull reality of the cockpit faded, replaced by the vibrant, seamless tapestry of a life unlived. Kaelen was back on his home world, the scent of fresh rain on green fields filling his lungs. His wife, her eyes crinkling with laughter, handed him a steaming mug. Their son, a boy he'd only known in fleeting holographic images, chased a wind-up toy across the sun-dappled floor. This was the life he'd yearned for, perfectly crafted, every regret erased. The fungus, a silent artisan, had woven every lost moment, every missed opportunity, into a flawless reality. He spent what felt like days, perhaps weeks, immersed. Time held no meaning here. He felt no hunger, no thirst, only an endless, profound contentment. His illusory family spoke words of love and forgiveness, and Kaelen, smiling serenely, accepted them all. The edges of this reality were no longer blurring. They were simply there, solid and utterly real. A sudden, jarring shift. The warmth of the illusion dissolved, replaced by a cold, hard truth. Kaelen found himself back in the glowing chamber, his hand still pressed against the Lumina Mycelium. His arm, which moments ago had felt strong and whole in the illusion, was now heavy, He looked down, and a gasp caught in his throat. The glittering patch he'd dismissed as dust was no longer a patch. It was a spreading network of delicate, translucent scales encasing his forearm. He tried to scrape it off, his fingernails tearing at his own flesh, drawing no blood, only a faint crystalline dust. It was part of him. A wave of ice-cold panic surged through his chest, stealing his breath. This wasn't dust. This wasn't age. This was happening. His eyes, wide with sudden, dawning horror, stared at the glittering invasion. Stumbling back to the Dust Devil's medical bay, Kaelen moved with a frantic desperation, his movements stiff and clumsy. He tore off his suit, ignoring the protest of his crystallizing skin, and activated the ship's antiquated medical scanner. The diagnostic tool, usually a source of reassuring beeps and green lights, shrieked. Its holographic display flickered wildly, unable to process the data. Organic tissue, it tried to report, was being replaced by silicate structures. Cellular integrity compromised. Readings were off the charts, impossible, alien. Kaelen stared, his trembling hands clutching the scanner, his mind racing through every medical textbook he'd ever skimmed. There was no category for this. No known pathology. He was watching his own body become something else, something utterly inorganic, and his desperate, analytical horror found no answers. The scanner's frantic beeps mirrored his own internal scream. He stumbled back to the glowing chamber, not out of fascination, but a dawning, terrible understanding. The beautiful, pulsating mycelium no longer looked like a treasure. It looked like a silent, hungry maw. He connected the impossible scanner readings, the stiffness, the glittering scales, to this alien life. It wasn't offering him a better life. It was consuming his own. You did this, he rasped, his voice thick with betrayal. He tried to pull away, to turn and flee, but a strange inertia held him. His feet felt rooted, his muscles heavy. More than that. A subtle, insidious pull tugged at his mind. A whisper of the perfect life, the loving family, the regrets erased. The hum of the fungus, once soothing, now grated, a low, predatory purr. Kaelen's horrified gaze was locked on the source of his transformation, his hands slowly moving away, but his mind, trapped between terror and longing, felt the luminescent tendrils reaching for him. The warmth that had once promised solace now clung to Kaelen like a shroud, turning his flesh to lead. He tried to push himself away from the glowing wall, to stand, to move, but his body protested with the grinding protest of old machinery. Each joint felt like it had been packed with gravel, tendons stretched taut and brittle beneath skin that no longer felt entirely his own. A grunt of pain escaped his lips, a raw, primal sound that was swallowed by the chamber's resonant hum, a hum that now seemed to mock his struggles, a low, guttural thrum of consumption. He forced one leg forward, then the other, the crystalline sheathing on his shins catching the bioluminescence, glittering like a macabre suit of armor. His muscles, once hardened by years of deep space labor, now moved with agonizing slowness, as if fighting against an invisible current. He stumbled, a desperate lurching effort, and fell to his knees, the impact sending a jolt of strange, brittle pain through his frame. His hand, as he tried to brace himself, scraped against the living rock, and Kaelen saw the truth reflected in the glowing surface. A web of iridescent scales now covered half his face, catching the light, turning his weathered features into a grotesque, glittering mask. This wasn't merely stiffness. It was a transformation, a creeping petrification, and every agonizing inch of movement was a battle he was losing. The fungus, ever the insidious puppeteer, responded to his physical agony with a fresh assault on his mind. The glowing chamber dissolved, replaced by a scene of impossible warmth. He stood not in the cold asteroid, but on the sun-drenched porch of his childhood home, the scent of fresh-cut grass and his mother's cooking filling the air. His father, younger, vibrant, stood by the fence, not with the weary resignation Kaelen remembered, but with a proud, approving smile. "You stayed, son," his father said, his voice rich with a forgiveness Kaelen had craved for decades. You chose us. A memory, twisted and perfected, where Kaelen had forgone the lure of the stars, the promise of fortune, for the simple, fulfilling life he'd abandoned. His mother, her face unlined by worry, reached out, her hand warm and real. This is what you could have had. The thought echoed, not as a whisper, but as a comforting truth. The longing was a physical ache, pulling him deeper into the illusion, offering a balm to the agony of his petrifying body. He felt the edges of his defiance flicker, the perfect lie almost too sweet to resist. Just give in, more's the illusion purred, and all your regrets will vanish. But even as the comforting warmth of the illusion threatened to consume him, a spark of defiance ignited deep within Kaelen. His internal voice, though strained, was firm. This wasn't retirement. This was a prison, built of his own longing, decorated with lies. He'd left home for a reason, a complex tapestry of ambition, stubbornness, and a desire to make his own mark. His last haul wasn't about escaping reality. It was about securing a real future, not a fabricated past. He forced his eyes open, tearing them away from the illusory embrace, back to the horrifying reality of the glowing chamber. The fungus pulsed aggressively, its light flaring in response to his mental resistance, as if annoyed by his will. Crystalline tears, cold and sharp, traced paths down his scale-covered cheeks, but his gaze was fierce, unyielding. His hand, heavy and stiff, clenched into a fist, a silent, defiant gesture. He would not surrender his mind to this beautiful, predatory lie. His body might be turning to stone, but his spirit, honed by decades of the void's unforgiving embrace, would not break. Far above, back in the Dust Devil's cockpit, a frantic symphony of alarms began to blare. Red warning lights strobed across the dusty controls, a cacophony of urgent beeps and automated vocalizations. Warning: life support at critical levels, power core instability detected, hull integrity compromised. Emergency atmospheric purge initiated. The ship, abandoned and neglected, was slowly dying, its systems succumbing to the cold, unforgiving vacuum of space. But the alarms, loud enough to wake the dead, barely registered in Kaelen's mind. His focus was entirely consumed by the internal battle, the desperate struggle to maintain his mental autonomy against the fungus's relentless psychological assault. The ship's frantic cries became just another background hum, a distant, irrelevant noise compared to the silent screams of his petrifying body and the insidious whispers in his mind. The external world was screaming, but the real war was being fought within the glowing heart of the asteroid, a war Kaelen was determined not to lose. The fungus, recognizing his renewed defiance, tightened its physical grip. Delicate, crystalline tendrils, shimmering with soft bioluminescence, had begun to snake out from the glowing walls, weaving around Kaelen's legs and lower torso. They were no longer merely growing in him. They were growing in him, anchoring him firmly to the living rock. His body, now almost entirely encased, glittered like a statue carved from a monstrous sapphire. Only his head and one arm retained any semblance of mobility, his fingers twitching, a last vestige of human agency. He was trapped, a living monument to his own regret, physically defeated but not yet broken. The despair was a cold, heavy weight, yet, within his crystallizing skull, Kaelen's thoughts raced, defiant. "You have my body, asterisk," he silently raged at the mycelium. "But you don't have my mind. Not yet." His crystalline eyes, wide and fiercely alive amidst the encroaching stone, stared out into the glowing chamber, a testament to a spirit that refused to yield, even as it became one with the mountain. The light of the Lumina Mycelium intensified, not with comfort, but with a searing, internal brilliance that clawed at Kaelen's mind. He was no longer merely seeing a memory, he was living it, trapped in the crucible of his greatest failure. The cavernous chamber dissolved, replaced by the cramped, stale air of his old homestead's kitchen. His mother, younger, her face etched with a familiar weariness, stood opposite him. "You're leaving, Kaelen? For what? More rocks? More empty promises?" Her voice, an illusion, was sharp, full of the very accusation he'd carried for decades. Then, his father's gruff, disappointed sigh, heavier than any asteroid. "There's a life here, son. A real one." The fungus amplified their voices, layered them with the ghost of his own justifications, his youthful ambition. No, Kaelen screamed internally, his mind a raw wound. It wasn't like this, you don't understand. But the illusion held him fast, pressing down on him, forcing him to witness the unlived life, the choices made, the love left behind, all twisted and sharpened into a weapon by the insidious hum of the mycelium. The fungus wanted him to accept this perfect, painful lie. As the illusion of his past threatened to consume him, a flicker, a glitch in the fabric of the fungal dream, caught Kaelen's eye. A brief, horrifying flash within the illusory kitchen. Not of his home, but of the glowing chamber. And, in its center, his own petrified form, crystalline and still, anchored to the mycelium. The image was instantaneous, grotesque, and undeniably real. The warmth he'd felt, the serenity, the comforting visions. They were not gifts. They were a sophisticated siphon, a biological trap. The fungus wasn't offering an alternative life. It was simply draining the regret that fueled its growth, leaving behind a husk. Rage, cold and pure, surged through Kaelen's crystallizing veins. You parasitic lie, he snarled, his voice a rasping whisper that vibrated through the illusion. It's not real. None of it. You're just a feeder. The clarity was like a jolt of pure energy, shattering the hyper-realistic dream. The kitchen fractured, splintered into shards of light and memory, revealing the stark, glowing reality of the chamber. Tears, crystalline and slow, tracked paths down his hardening face. His physical body, almost entirely encased in glittering stone, remained immobile, but Kaelen's mind was a maelstrom of furious defiance. The fungus pulsed aggressively, its light flickering, its hum now a discordant drone as it fought to reassert control. It flooded his thoughts with fresh temptations, alternate paths, easy forgiveness. The word resonated internally, a singular, unyielding core of will. He had chosen his life, with all its burdens and regrets. They were his. They were real. You won't take that from me, Kaelen whispered, the crystalline shell around his mouth barely parting. My mistakes are mine. My life is mine. He embraced the ache of what he'd lost, the gnawing regret, the loneliness of the void. These were the scars of his journey, the truth of Kaelen Vance. The Lumina Mycelium recoiled, its tendrils quivering, its light dimming for a fraction of a second, unable to comprehend this rejection of its perfect false solace. The victory was purely mental, a last, desperate assertion of self. His body, however, was a lost cause. Only his right hand, grotesquely twisted, still retained a sliver of mobility. Driven by an instinct more profound than survival, Kaelen focused his fading strength. With agonizing slowness, he dragged his crystallizing fingertips across a rough patch of rock near his petrified leg. The stone grated, and with immense effort, he scratched crude, jagged symbols. A skull, a glowing tendril, a single, desperate word, run. Each movement sent jolts of agony through his stiffening arm. His muscles screamed, his bones ground. He grunted, a guttural sound of pure, raw determination. This wasn't for him. It was for the next fool, the next explorer drawn by the treacherous glow. As the last, trembling stroke faded, the crystalline growth surged, encasing his fingers, freezing them mid-motion, the warning now etched forever in stone. Kaelen's final breath hitched, a faint, metallic rasp. The last flicker of warmth, the last spark of human muscle, extinguished. His head slumped, the petrification complete. He was a statue, a glittering monument to a life lived and lost among the stars. Yet, his crystalline eyes, now perfectly clear and unblinking, remained open. They reflected the pulsing ethereal light of the Lumina Mycelium, 1,000 tiny points of blue and violet. A single, perfect tear of crystal clung to his cheek, catching the light. The ambient hum of the fungus, which had raged and fought, now settled into a steady, resonant tone, a low, melodic thrum that filled the chamber. It was the sound of a predator sated, a new addition integrated. Kaelen Vance, the weary miner, was gone. But within the glittering shell, a consciousness, perhaps, still lingered, a silent echo in the heart of the crystal mountain. The chamber pulsed with a new, resonant energy. Kaelen Vance, or what remained of him, stood as its undeniable centerpiece. His form, once defiant flesh and bone, now shimmered with an inner, ethereal light, a silent counterpoint to the mycelium's steady pulse. It was no longer just a body. It was a living monument, carved from regret and crystallized defiance. Delicate tendrils of Lumina Mycelium, previously content to merely envelop him, now wove themselves into the deeper crevices of his crystalline skin, a seamless integration. The very air of the chamber felt subtly different, heavy with a profound, almost mournful beauty. Kaelen's essence, the sum of his choices and his struggles, was not merely observed but absorbed, woven into the vast, glowing tapestry of the fungus. He was a silent sentinel, forever reflecting the eerie light of his transformation. Yet Kaelen's mind, that stubborn, weary core, persisted. Suspended within the crystalline matrix, he felt no pain, no hunger, no weariness. Only a vast, quiet awareness. The regrets that had once clawed at his soul were still there, echoes in the crystal chambers of his mind, but they no longer held their venom. He had faced them, accepted them, and in doing so found a strange, stony peace. He was aware of his petrified state, a glittering prison of his own choosing, yet paradoxically, he felt freer than he had in decades. The fungus's manipulative whispers were gone, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that was both alien and, impossibly, his own. His consciousness, a beacon in the stone, reflected on a life lived, choices made, and a retirement finally found, albeit not the one he'd sought. His internal perception, once confined to the limitations of flesh, now began to expand. He sensed the broader network of the Lumina Mycelium, a vast, interconnected consciousness that stretched through the asteroid's hollow core. Faint echoes of other absorbed lives, long-forgotten miners, or perhaps even older, alien intelligences, rippled through the fungal web. Their joys, their sorrows, their final thoughts, a vast, unfathomable symphony of cosmic regret. Kaelen was a part of it, yet distinct. His identity, hardened by defiance, remained a solitary node in the mycelium's grand design. He observed, he learned, he existed, an isolated spark of humanity amidst an ocean of alien awareness, his wonder tinged with the profound isolation of his new, interconnected existence. The crude scratch marks on the rock face, Kaelen's last desperate act of defiance, now glowed with an unnerving phosphorescence, the fungus itself highlighting the very warning it had ignored. Each etched line pulsed in sync with the mycelium, a permanent bioluminescent testament to a singular human will. Kaelen's crystalline eyes, unblinking, seemed to peer through the eternity of the asteroid, a silent sentinel, a frozen scream across the void. He was a monument not just to his end, but to the enduring, desperate will of humanity when confronted with the incomprehensible. His gaze held the haunting wisdom of a soul that had paid the ultimate price for knowledge, yet found a strange form of peace in the transaction. Back in the Dust Devil, the last emergency lights flickered, a dying gasp of human technology against the indifferent vacuum. Dust, undisturbed for days, weeks perhaps, coated every surface. The hum of failing life support systems finally sputtered into silence, leaving the ship a cold, dark husk. Its control panel, once Kaelen's trusted companion, now merely reflected the distant, indifferent stars. The Dust Devil was another silent hulk in the asteroid, a marker of a journey that had ended, not in a sun-drenched retirement, but in a transformation beyond human comprehension. It was a metal tomb, a forgotten marker of a life that had ceased to be, replaced by something far more ancient and terrifyingly beautiful. Centuries later, from the cold, indifferent expanse of the Kuiper Belt, Oblivion's End, had become a spectacle. No longer a mere chunk of primordial rock, the asteroid now pulsed with a faint, rhythmic glow. Deep within its core, the Lumina Mycelium had continued its silent, inexorable growth, weaving its crystalline tendrils through every fissure, every cavern, until the entire celestial body throbbed with an internal, ethereal light. It was a slow, deliberate heartbeat in the void, a beacon of unnatural beauty. To the unsuspecting explorer, it would appear as a rare cosmic jewel, a wonder of the deep. But to those who might one day venture too close, it was a siren's call, a subtle lure in the vast, unforgiving darkness promising enlightenment, while whispering of quiet oblivion. The asteroid, once a miner's desperate hope, now held a new, chilling purpose. It waited. The Lumina Mycelium was not a predator in the conventional sense. It lacked teeth, claws, or the brute force of a hegemony bioweapon. Its evolutionary strategy was far more insidious, a testament to cosmic horror refined into elegant biological perfection. It did not merely kill, it consumed identity. It didn't destroy a body so much as it repurposed it, transforming flesh and bone into crystalline conduit, a monument to its own growth. Its sustenance was not merely organic matter, but the very essence of sentient thought, memory, regret, the what-ifs that plagued a mind. It was a silent weaver, spinning illusions from the threads of a host's deepest desires, lulling them into a tranquil, eternal dream, while their physical form petrified. The process was slow, beautiful, and utterly merciless. A new kind of hunter had emerged in the black, one that preyed not on the body, but on the soul, leaving behind only a glittering shell, a perfect, lifeless sculpture of what once was. Deep within the asteroid, Kaelen Vance's crystalline form remained, a silent sentinel integrated into the glowing network. His was a legacy not of riches, but of defiance. The rough, crude warning he had etched into the rock with his last vestiges of strength was now subtly highlighted by the fungus's bioluminescence, a glowing testament to his final, desperate act of agency. It was a message for any who might follow, a final, poignant plea from a man who had chosen to face his own reality, however grim, rather than succumb to a beautiful lie. His crystalline eyes, still open, reflected the endless, pulsing light of the mycelium. They held a silent story of struggle and acceptance, a testament to the human spirit's capacity to choose truth, even when facing an inescapable existential horror. Years later, a new exploratory vessel, the Starseeder, drifted through the Kuiper Belt, its advanced scanners sweeping the dark. On its pristine bridge, Captain Eva Rostova studied a flickering display. "Captain, I'm detecting an anomalous energy signature from asteroid 43B, reported her science officer. "Highly unusual, rhythmic, almost organic." Rostova leaned forward, a flicker of intrigue in her eyes. "Unique, you say? Chart a course. Let's see what wonders the void has hidden from us." Her smile was confident, expectant, utterly unaware of the beautiful, silent trap that awaited them. The Oblivion's End asteroid continued its slow, luminous orbit, a silent, glittering monument in the cosmic black. It was a tomb, beautiful and terrifying, housing the petrified echo of a miner's regrets and the chilling testament to a life form that fed on the very fabric of consciousness. The faint, rhythmic glow persisted, a hypnotic pulse across the light years, waiting. It was a living monument to human choices, to the allure of escape, and to the profound, often terrifying, mysteries that lurked in the silent, star-dusted void. The galaxy was vast, and some of its secrets were best left undisturbed.